Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Enlightened Investor. We've got a special guest with us here today. That man there is Dr. Jim Muncy, and he's really our time expert. And today we're going to talk about his book, Time Basics. That's an outstanding book to read. And, why should we listen to Jim? Not just because he's a professor at Bradley, one of my great friends, but also because he's probably the world's leader in ethics of consumers. He was the executive director of the Association of Consumer Research. One thing I was impressed with you, Jim, is that you published in the #1 journal of marketing. He's taught at Clemson, Oklahoma, Valdosta State, Bradley, Texas Tech. So he's a wonderful resource to have here. And talking about resources, our most valuable resource isn't our money; it's our time. So thanks for being here, Jim.
Glad to be here.
Yep. So this morning, I went to work out this morning and at the gym, and I looked over yonder and I saw a 10-car pileup at the Dunkin' Donuts waiting for coffee. And is that, I was thinking to myself today, we're going to talk about time basics. Are these people really optimizing their lives and their time? The tick, tick, tick.
You got to use the call ahead.
Yeah, that's right. Use the call ahead.
On the app.
Yeah.
One of the time basics, the book's built around 24 time basics, and one of them is the value principle. And it says, poverty awaits those who spend high value time doing low value things. Now, what that means is, what is the most valuable part of your day? Some of those people, their brains may not even be functioning till 9 a.m. And so spending time waiting in a car for coffee, it's not. But if the time in the day that they're brightest, they're most productive, they have the best opportunity to connect with clients, whatever, is between 9 and noon, then it's a different question about whether or not they're spending 20 minutes of that time. So throughout the day, not all of our time is of equal value, because we have a thing called a circadian rhythm, which means that certain times of the day, I'm very much a morning person. And so early mornings, whenever I make sure that I do the things that are most important to me, there's also times when, there's certain times that are better to meet with clients, and there's better times not to. And so it depends on the person, because there's certain times during the day I might as well be sitting in a line because my brain's shot and I'm,
Well, that's what you mentioned in the book too, because you said that it's not like this book is like you got to follow each of these steps. It's like there's different processes for different people.
Absolutely.
I like that. I did not know that. I thought this was just going to be, okay, everybody pick up the book and everybody do the same thing. Well, that's not the case.
Yeah, and that's why they're principles and not just me. Because a lot of time management stuff, they say, here, let me give you a system. Well, system would work perfect for me, might not work for somebody else. And as a matter of fact, my system has evolved over time. Sometimes this worked quite well. Sometimes, things happen, right. And so I'm on a different type of system. Even the technology can change the way it did a system. I got a different technology tool. It's called a Remarkable. It's hard to explain what it is, but it's sort of like a tablet, but not really. But I realized that I could plan my day better on that, and so it changed. So there's a lot of reasons why it changed.
Well, and I think people might wonder why we're talking about time management today, but I mean, if you think about it, if you look at it when you're doing, life planning, financial planning, wealth management, I mean, money's important, relationships are important, but undoubtedly your time is the most important asset, because that's what allows you to spend time with the people that care, or with the things that bring you fulfillment and purpose. So, I mean, I think this topic is probably the most important that we've talked about.
I think so.
I'm excited about talking about this thing.
Yeah. Ben Franklin said, do you love your life? Then value your time, because time is the stuff that life is made of.
Sure. And be intentional, right? Okay, so I'll shut up.
Go ahead.
I'm excited about this.
Yeah, this is going to be great. So, Jim, why are some people motivated to optimize their life? And, some people have such difficulty in managing, their time and their efforts. So it's a broad question. You can write a dissertation on that, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of different directions. First of all, different personality types. Some people have more of a melancholy personality, and they they love to have all their ducks in a row quacking in unison, and, they don't have any problem whatsoever managing their time. Other people, they're not wired that way. And so it's much more of a challenge for them to manage their time. And as I said earlier, that's the reason why somebody who has a real melancholy personality, a real order, likes to have a lot of order, likes to keep everything straight, they're going to have one type of time management system that just fits them perfectly. But you take somebody that's a little bit more sanguine, a little bit more people-oriented, and would much rather be at a party than sitting at a desk. You take somebody like that, they still need a time management system, but their system would be quite different than the one who would be more melancholic.
Let me ask you this: the melancholics, so they're organized, but have they taken time to see if their organization is revolving around their true values?
Well, that's one of the things, is that they enjoy organizing. It doesn't necessarily mean that their organization is priority based,
right?
Or it's even worth the amount of time that they put into it. Because I remember one time I gave a time management speech, and a lady came up to me afterwards. She says, "I just love this stuff." She says, "The only problem is I spend so much time managing my time, I don't have enough time to do anything." You need to
reorganize.
You need a new system.
Yeah.
But there's another thing that's a big reason that a lot of people don't manage their time. And let me tell you about a study that was done in psychology. One of the things they do sometimes in psychology is they have you imagine things, and then they measure which side of your brain is most active. I say, which side of your brain lights up, okay?
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Well, what they did is they asked people a question to do this. They said, I want you to think about yourself. And what they did is they measured where their brain lit up. And then they said, now I want you to think about another person. And they started thinking about another person. And a different part of their brain lit up. Okay? Then here was the thing that was interesting. They said, now think about yourself in the future, 5, 10 years in the future. And they measured which part of their brain lit up. It was the other people.
Oh, yeah.
So now what that means is that whenever I see myself 20 years down the road, I don't see that as being me. I see that as being another person. So if somebody starts smoking, whenever they're young, you sit there saying, you realize that's gonna kill you. That's gonna give you cancer. You're gonna die a very painful death. But they're not thinking that. They're thinking, I'm gonna smoke the cigarettes and some other poor smuck's gonna die. And so one of the big challenges in life is to realize it's the 24th principle. It's where I end the book. Is one of the big challenges is the person in your future is actually you. Your brain doesn't get that, but you've got to figure that out.
Interesting. Wow.
Well, and you mentioned in the book, too, the other part is that people don't understand the brevity of life. They just think that this life is this unlimited resource like oxygen, and we're going to have plenty of it.
Yeah, and that's actually, those are the two bookends. The one I just talked about, that we've got to realize that it's us in the future, was how I finished the book. How I started the book was with the perception principle. And the perception principle is it's later than you think.
Yeah.
You think, days are going to go on and on and on, because every day I get a fresh 24 hours. I don't have to ask for them. I don't have to, but every day I get a new 24 hours show up. And so that's the way we see them. But one of these days, you're going to get the last one.
Right.
And then you'll have no more. And everything you accomplished was what you did with those. I remember when I was writing this book, because I was teaching classes on time management at the university. And I really didn't want to start out with the perception principle because it's kind of morbid. Death gives life perspective. I talk about Michael Landon in there, how he, everything was going along for him. He was an old actor. Actually, he wasn't old. He was pretty young when he died. He was in his early 50s, very great health, except he got pancreatic cancer and died. And while he was about to die, he says, he was doing an interview. I said, what would you tell people? He says, there's only so many tomorrows. If you want to do something, do it now. Yep. And, it's kind of morbid. But then I told the students, and they said, no, you got to start out with that, because until people realize the shortness of time, they will never value their time. From the financial perspective, scarcity is what gives something value. What's the most valuable thing in the world? Air. But do we value air? How many of us walk around going, oh, this is great, this room has air? No, we don't value it. How come? Because it's in abundance. Well,
So you go underwater.
yeah, spend 30 seconds without it, and you'll suddenly
Right.
start to value it.
Yeah.
Well, time is abundant. Time keeps going on. It seems like we have it forever, and so it's just like it's hard for us to realize that the person in the future is me. It's also hard to realize that my time is limited. And so those two things, and that's why I put them as the bookends of the book, those two things work against us balancing our time. Until when we realize that time is limited, and whenever we realize that that person in the future is me, things begin to change.
Wouldn't you agree that most people are reactive rather than proactive? And like you mentioned, they don't have a plan, they don't have a system. It's just
Here's what I've noticed, is that it's like chess, okay? Who wins at chess? It's the person who can see more moves in the future. Like, for example, I'm decent at chess, but not great, because I can see the board now, and I can see it about 2 or 3 moves in the future. But if I go up against somebody that can see the board 3 or 4 moves in the future, they're going to beat me every time. Okay? Well, that's the way it is with life. Some people, they can't see even 1 move in the future. All they see is what's happening now. They don't think in terms of the future.
it's that whole vision that you mentioned.
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
book,
And but what happens is some people, they can see today, and they can see 6 months in the future. Some people can see today, they can see 6 months, a year, 2 years in the future. Somebody can see today, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years in the future. Somebody who can't see beyond their nose, they're not going to, for example, engage in financial planning.
Correct.
They're not going to engage in planning their life, and all that's happening is life is just smacking them upside the head, right and left. But the person who can anticipate what's happening, anticipate the future, they're the ones who realize that, okay, now they have a reason and they have a clarity that helps them move towards that future that they want. But if you can't have clarity about what that future is, you can't see 2 steps ahead. It's going to be really hard. And so therefore, they just are very reactive. They react rather than respond. Reacting is terrible. Responding is good. You know, you go to your doctor and he says, you're responding to the medicine. You're like, wow, that's good. If you go to the doctor and he says you're reacting to the medicine, you're going like, oh, that's not good. That's the way life is. You know, if you're just reacting to what's coming, that's not good. But if you're responding, well, you're better able to respond as if you've thought through and you've looked through and where this is happening relative to the future.
Maybe a follow-up question on that is, how do you get people to maybe change from reactionary to being more of a planner?
The only thing I can do,
That's a tough question.
the only answer I
Help
have
me on that one.
is through trying to help them understand
Awareness.
this. Yeah,
You got to help them get awareness and clarity. And
I've written 2
prioritize.
books, and the other one was just on success in general.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a few keys to all success, and there I kind of explain how you're thinking, how you think. It's all about how you think. You are where you are in life because of the way you think. The way you think couldn't have possibly taken you anywhere else. So if you want to change where you are in life, you have to change the way you think.
For sure.
And then I say, you think the way you do because of what you fed your mind. Whether it's through your entertainment, whether it's through the books you read, whether it's through the people you surround yourself with, whether it's through the sermons that you've heard, whether it's through any of these things, you think the way you do because of what you fed your mind. So if you want to change, you have to change what you feed your mind. And so therefore, and that was the whole basics. That was the whole basis of success. And then I start talking about things that the way proper people think, or the successful people think, and the way unsuccessful people think. But it all starts with changing the way you think.
Sure. Zig Ziglar used to say that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
right?
really.
Remember Zig?
Absolutely.
Remember that guy?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's great.
I've seen him several times.
Oh, cool. I've met him a few times.
Back
too.
when he was alive. Haven't
I
seen
know.
him since he's been dead.
Well,
So,
and part of
go
the
ahead.
thinking, when you mentioned it, because we do this with financial planning, but there's a lot of corollaries for our planning and your planning, is it's got to be values and purpose-based.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or you just, there's
You
no
know.
meaning to it.
And that's one of the, actually the second to the last principle that I have is a balance principle. I said balance comes from quality time at work and quantity time at home. You have to be able to balance the family and your work, because how much would my family love me if we were broke and living on the street? They'd say, "Dad, go to work." But if I'm always at work, then what happens is they don't value me either. So somehow or another, those are two values, not the only two values, but those are two values, for example, that we have to balance against each other. So how do we do that? Well, work spells love, RESULTS. They want results. Okay? At work, they don't, that's what they care about, results. Give me results.
Mm-hmm.
Show me the money. At home, they spell love, TIME. So, if you're violating some of these principles, for example, if at work you're spending high value time doing low value things, if you aren't planning, you don't have a plan, if you're just kind of reacting to whatever happens, then how do you spend quality time at work? Okay, so what you have to do is you start your day. I start my day every day with a plan. Now, here's the thing about planning. You have to realize that the value of planning comes from the process, not the plan itself. Because usually if you start out with a plan, your day starts at 8 o'clock, by 8:30, the plan's already out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a good portfolio.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's all about the process.
Yeah, it's the process that you go through. Okay? So if you, but if you start out every day with a plan, then that gets you there, and that plan is value based. And then all time you're working, you're constantly thinking, I've got to get back to work. I got to get back to work, because everything's going to pull you away. I mean, everything's going to pull you away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that we spend our life with things pulling us away from what we're actually getting paid for, and that's okay. I mean, that's part of the work life. If you can only work whenever there's no distractions, then you're useless. But what happens is you have to go take care of those distractions, and then you have to think, how do I get back to work? How do I get back to work? And then if you work all the time you work, and it's like another time management thing that you hear a lot is just wherever you are, be there. If you're at work and you're there, then when you go home, now you get rid of that results mentality and you jump into relationship mentality, and now that's when you have golden moments with your kids, with your spouse. Is not whenever you walk in, sit down on your kid's bed and say, okay, I'm ready, let's have some quality time now. They're going to go like, Dad, I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. It's whenever you just happen to be together, and those magic moments show up. It's like there's this one of my favorite country and western songs. I used to love to torment my students with country and western music. Playing songs, and one of them is Just Fishing. She thinks we're just fishing, and it's just about a father's out with his daughter, and she's little daughter, and she thinks they're just fishing, and he's like, no, we're building amazing memories, and that's true. So that's what happens. Now there's other areas of your life too. There's a spiritual side. You have to work in time to take care of your health. You have to work in. There's other times you have to work in. But you gotta make sure that it's intentional. It's not just right. What do I want to do today?
Right. Yeah. Yes. Right. So that's why I mentioned, and we can throw that up and let people look at it. But we use a tool called the Wheel of Life. And basically, it just gives people, awareness of are you balanced? What's your wheel look like? If it's not looking like a wheel and it looks like a wagon wheel with spokes and things, you definitely have some areas you got to work on. And it's nice to do it once and then maybe wait 3 years and revisit it again. Because once people begin to sometimes, they've never given any thought to it. Yeah. And now they've given thought to it, and maybe they've done something intentionally to try and change that. And normally you can try and round out that wheel. Yeah.
Yeah, there's another principle I talk about in that is if you're always, it's the efficiency principle. If you're always working, you don't have to be efficient.
Right.
I remember
that's one of your principles in here.
Yeah, that's right. If one of the problems some people fall into is and I was like this, whenever I went through the PhD program, I was always at the office. How come? Well, I was unmarried, didn't have anything to go home to. Only thing I wanted to do was break out in the middle of the day, go play some basketball, and that was as good a place to be as anywhere in the world. Then I got married, and then we had kids. And whenever I had kids, I realized, I can't do that. I can't live my life that way. Actually, the song Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin, some of you may have heard that before, had a huge impact on my life. And it's about a father who didn't have time for his kids. When his kid got old, kid didn't have time for the father. Mm-hmm. Had a huge impact on my life. And so I said, you know what? And I put specific constraints on my time. And you know what happened? I didn't lose any productivity whatsoever. And the reason why is because the things that I threw out were the things that really weren't providing value. I didn't throw out work on my journal of marketing. I didn't throw out my research. I threw out time at the water fountain talking to people about yesterday's football game, or time, because I want to get, you throw out, whenever you start putting constraints on your time, and you wake up in the morning and you're only going to have, at around 5 o'clock, I'm going to leave and go home. Okay, so I've got to get it all done before 5, or it's not going to get done. So it really clarifies what you're going to be doing.
Sure. I'm going to bring in a little comment you have here on your vision. It says, to say yes to something means you say no to something else.
Absolutely.
So exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah, it's the second principle that I did, the excluded alternative. Once you realize that time is limited, I start out by saying, it's later than you think. Once you realize that, then you have to realize the time management challenge arise, because to say yes to something means to say no to something else. All of us are doing something every day. I mean, it's not like any of us just stand there for 30 minutes during the day, just like not doing anything. Everybody's life is filled 24 hours a day. How much are you going to put in your life? 24 hours worth. So if you're going to add something to it, you have to throw something out. Now, fortunately, you can usually look in your life and see a lot of things that's worth throwing out. And that's part of what you're doing with time management. Part of what you talk about in terms of your value is, okay, it's like the old Bob Singer song, Now it's, life's gotten complicated. I've got deadlines and commitments, what to leave in, what to leave out. That's the challenge as your life becomes more crowded, is to make sure that you're throwing out the right things, mm-hmm. and you're not throwing out the wrong things.
Awesome.
Yeah. Talking pre-show here a little bit, I really enjoyed his comments on, Jim was a basketball player, went to college even on a scholarship, but when he had kids, he ended up staying active, but he did it in a different way. He did it in the way that the kids would enjoy. So now he's not only a basketball player, you fell into being a Taekwondo.
Yeah, because I love basketball because I like games where size is an advantage, not skill. Because I got a lot of size and no skill. Yeah. I'm 6'5". Okay,
yeah.
Like basketball.
He is actually tall, folks.
Baseball, forget baseball. That takes skill. I'm a total goof on the baseball. So I always loved playing basketball. But when our kids were kind of elementary, junior high, early high school years, I decided to quit doing basketball and do Taekwondo, because I could do that with them. And so we went all up through the ranks, and we all became second-degree black belts together. And that's something that we very much valued as a family together. Now, once that they reached an age that they said, okay, yeah, this is all we want, then they were at the age where I could move on, mm-hmm. and go back to playing basketball, and I did. Mm-hmm. But there's certain times where you just have to say, look, I got to set this aside. And there's one concept that I use in this, that I say multiple times over and over, is a lot of times you have to make sacrifices, or you have to do things different for a reason and a season. Okay, so for example, if you are if you're a farmer, you're not going to have a whole lot of quality time with the kids during harvest.
Kind of like accounting, right?
Yeah, if you're a CPA, you're not going to have a whole lot
springtime.
of... Yeah, you're not, April 14th, you're not going to be having quality time on the golf course with the kids, Right. That's not going to happen. But whenever, and I tell a story about a really good friend of mine who, we were really tight friends, and his wife was real good friends of mine. Whenever he was in medical residency, He was becoming a surgeon, and he was in his surgeon residency. He had no time for his family. But then once he finished that and he went off and he was a surgeon, his kids were really glad he did.
Right, yeah.
Had plenty of money, they didn't have to worry about money again. But he could then cut back and now get back into the kid's life. Nancy, his wife, understood that what the sacrifices she was making
For the future.
was for a reason
Yep.
and for a season. Now, here's the important thing. If you do have to make it through tax season, when tax season is over, you got some payback for the family. If you have to do the harvest, don't get distracted during the winter when you can spend time with the family. So all of us have crunch time. I know, end of the semester, my wife doesn't expect much of me. Start of the semester, she doesn't expect much of me. I won't tell you what my youngest daughter, whenever we had 3 of our 4 kids in college, all living at home, and then me as a college professor, I won't tell you what the youngest one, who was still in high school, used to call finals week, but it wasn't a nice thing. because there's times whenever we just say, hey, Lisa, I can't do anything during finals.
Sure.
I,
And I think we do this every day. I think someone, like a quick, the dean calls, important client calls, we kind of stop what we're doing and we address this immediate concern. And that's what kind of pulls us away a little bit from what we're trying to do throughout the day. But we have that plan, process, product. That's what we talk about here.
Yeah.
It's just sort of, I think that's part of life, right? Is managing through these times of importance and weighting these importance.
Yeah, if somebody didn't have a time management system, maybe some people out there are saying, okay, maybe I need a time management system. One of the principles is any system is better than no system. Here's the system I would give them. If you have no time management system whatsoever, or your time management system, your total time management system consists of appointments on Google Calendar. If that's it, then here's what I do. There was a story that I talk about in the book where there was a guy who he was a management consultant, and he had a friend, and he went by his friend's factory, and the guy said, "Man," he says, "how's it going?" He goes, "Everything's in a mess." He says, "I need your help." He says, "Okay, but before I help you out, I want to ask you to do something." He said, "Yeah." He says, "Pull out a sheet of paper." So he pulls out a sheet of paper. He says, "What are the 6 most important things you need to get done today?" Write them down. He says, "Okay." He says, "All right, now put a 1 next to the most important, a 2 next to the next most important, down through a 6, the least important." He says, "Now here's what I want you to do. Go to work on 1. Don't even think about 2 through 6. Don't even think about it. Just stay focused on 1. Now, here's what's going to happen. Things are going to pull you away from 1. That's great. That's expected. Your mindset should always be, as you're doing the things that distract you, I've got to get back to 1. And then when you finish it, mark it off and go to work on number 2. Now, your goal is not to get through all 6 things. Your goal is to make sure you do 1 before 2, 2 before 3, 3 before 4, and if you spend your whole day on 1, at least you spent your whole day doing the most important thing. You say, well, but what if I have to accomplish this down here? Then it's number 4. Well, it should have been number 1 then. And he said, and the next day, pull out a new sheet of paper, make your list again. And he says, do that. And you do that for a while. And the guy says, okay. He says, how much do I owe you? He says, just pay me what it's worth. About 6 months later, this guy the consultant walks to his mailbox, and there's a check from this guy and his company for $10,000.
Cool.
He's like, needless to say, he calls him up. He says, what's this about? He says, you said pay me what it's worth. It's worth a lot more than that. He said, I started doing it. I taught it to my managers. And now all that chaos that was totally dominating our facility has gone away because everybody has learned to set priorities, just 6. You don't need to do more than that. Well, what happens if you get through all 6? Add a 7 and an 8 and a 9. But you keep the most important things first. Now, here's the other thing that pulls us away, and this is a very important thing for people to understand in terms of time management. It's a concept that hard time crowds out soft time. We all have 2 types of commitments. We have hard time commitments and soft time commitments. For example, my class is hard time. I don't have much choice. I build everything around my class. Doesn't make any difference what's happening. I build it around my class. That's hard time. We have these hard time commitments, and then we have soft time commitments that we have to do, but we have flexibility in terms of when to do them. Okay? When I make out my to-do list during the day, I have it into 3 sections. I have habits, hard time, soft time. Okay, habits are things that I'm going to do every day. I'm going to do exercise every day. I'm going to take my vitamins every day. There's certain things I'm going to do every day. And then I have hard time. These are things that I have to do. And then I'm going to have soft time. And soft time, these are things that I want to do, but I have flexibility. Then the other thing I do down at soft time is some of the things down at soft time I write in bold. Some of them I just write in regular, pen. The bold things are things that I have to get done today. They will not wait till tomorrow. They are the most urgent things. Now, I'm going to be the first thing. I don't have to bold hard time because I got to do hard time anyway. Mm-hmm. Even if my class isn't the most important thing I have to do today, I'm going to be there. Don't want the dean showing up saying, "Jim, where were you? We kind of expected you to be in class today." And so so hard time, that's what you have anyway. Another problem people have is they totally fill up their schedule with hard time, so they don't have any soft time to do the things that are really important. And so therefore, you have to realize before you make a hard time commitment, it's much better to make a soft time commitment than a hard time commitment. But once you be very, very careful of making hard time commitments, because hard time commitments crowds out soft time. If you don't have soft times, a lot of times you don't get to the things that are urgent. That are important, but not urgent, that Steve Covey talks about in 7 Habits.
Yeah, and we talked about Zig earlier. Zig Ziglar said, keep the main thing the main thing.
That's right, yeah.
So,
because we're dealing a lot with, at least at my level, I deal with a lot of successful people, and the problem is, I think, on a big macro level, is they just spend too much time on the career and the work, and like we've alluded to in the conversation, is the family time becomes second seat to the career, and the importance is really getting a balance to make sure you're getting that family time.
The 2 ways you do that, and I've already mentioned them. One is that you constrain your time. Okay, you may even make, sometimes family, husband and wife, they say Tuesday night's date night. They make Tuesday nights hard time. It doesn't make any difference what happens.
Make it hard time, not soft time.
Yeah. You make time with the kids. For us, hard time was we did a spiritual devotion in our family every night before anyone went to bed. Every night. Every night.
Cool.
That was hard time. Mm-hmm. Every night. Didn't make any difference. You couldn't go to bed before we did the spiritual devotion. Now, sometimes, it probably averaged about an hour a night throughout the kids' time, and they loved it. They remember that. That was some of the best times. Now, sometimes, it was like, Jesus wept. Okay, let's pray. It was just, it was like,
quick,
but we made a hard time commitment to that. So sometimes you have to make hard time commitments
to your personal life.
To your personal life too. Sometimes you have to constrain your life down where you say, I'll just work this amount, and then let the chips fall where they may in your career. And you'll be surprised how much it won't really hurt your career. You say, well, but I'm the owner of the business. I have to be there. If you constrain your life down, you'll find a way for the business to keep on going for those hours when you're not there.
Let me ask you one more.
Yeah. So
the future of that.
So before we'll let you get going here in a second. We were going to get an hourglass, Jim. We were going to get. So we know your time's valuable, and we got one more question for you here. So
all right. So what do you do with people that? When do you retire? Because what do you do with these people that just can't turn that switch off and don't want to retire?
Well, Warren Buffett, right? He does the same thing every day for 70-some years.
A lot of people have trouble though turning off that switch, saying, "I'm done. I'm not going to work anymore."
It depends on how much you like your job. I guarantee I'm not going to retire until my body tells me I have to. If my mind's not as sharp, or, there's certain things that can happen in my body that'll make me retire.
Just get more balance in your personal life.
But I love what I do. You know,
I'm
somebody
with
asked,
you. Yeah.
somebody asked Willie Nelson, you know, they said, people are always asking me, when am I going to retire? He says, all I do is play the guitar and play golf. Which one should I give up? You know, my job, I
He
teach
just
and I
said
research.
that. Actually, he just said that.
Yeah. In my job, I teach and I do research. I love both of them.
Yeah.
Don't want to give either of them up. But whenever you do, then you have to find another purpose. I already know if I were to have to retire this year, I know exactly what the next thing is after I retire. I already know exactly what I'm going to do if I were to retire today. You have to keep that in your mind.
Good.
Cool. Jim, it's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
It's
you
been
so
a
much
great
for
one.
spending some time on the time basics, and a lot of wisdom was had in this room today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
Folks, thanks for watching The Light Investor. Please, if you like the material, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.